I talk to them, and I'm a pretty curious person just in general. So I really like to ask questions, and just started hearing about, those 37 years out on the road and his love for trucking, his sacrifices he was making as, he's a father of five. He had 5 kids. Wow. And the sacrifices he made as an over-the-road driver over those years, and how he was really doing it to keep, a roof over their head and food on their plates. And, just hearing probably some of the big fish stories of his time out on the road. And it just threw me down this rabbit hole of the trucking industry. And, I dug deep into it, and just seeing stats of the average life expectancy of a truck driver is 16 years less than the average population, right? 70% of truck drivers are obese, the highest rates of diabetes among any other occupation in the United States.
Welcome to the ThinkFreight Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Werdeen. It's my pleasure to announce today's guest, Dr. Mark Manera. He's the founder of SupplyChainFitness. Dr. Mark, welcome to the ThinkFreight Podcast today. How you doing?
Yeah, Thomas, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm excited for the conversation, and
Thank you so much for coming, man. I found your posts probably a couple months ago, and I really was inspired by what you're doing, right? I mean, your message is really awesome. And, there's a lot of people in the space that are trying to help truck drivers. And that message, that you and guys like Mike Lombard really are pushing to help drivers be, more in shape and to be just the best versions of themselves, to live more active and longer lives. I love that message. So I really appreciate, what you're doing. And I wanted to have you on and, just talk more about health and, for truck drivers and anyone else really in the supply chain space.
Yeah, man. Well, dude, when you start to see the statistics, it gets scarier and scarier every line that you read. And then you get to know the people on a personal level, and it just multiplies all of those feelings. And it's there's so many people in this industry, drivers being in the forefront just because of some of the unique barriers that they face on a day-to-day basis with their lifestyle and some of the sedentary restraints of being behind the wheel for 11 to 14, 11 hours a day. But I think even across, outside of just drivers, we work with the whole supply chain. We come into a trucking company and work with everyone under the umbrella of that organization. And there's people, just being in the supply chain takes a certain demand from a career standpoint. And I think there's a lot of people out there who put their health on the back burner and really need to make it more of a priority and find someone or find a way to have a personalized plan that gets the ball rolling or the tires turning to start making some of those changes.
Yeah, I completely agree. You and I were talking off the podcast a little bit about, some of the reasons why, I'm so passionate about this. I've experienced, some of those pains in not taking care of yourself, and really wanting to better yourself and be more active, because you don't want to put not just yourself through that and your own body through that, but you also don't want to put your family through that. And I think that's one of the biggest things that, drivers, and anyone in supply chain don't think about is, when you're not taking care of, yourself in the way of, eating properly, getting enough exercise, taking care of your mental health, those things, they're going to cut your lifespan shorter. And you may think, it's just going to be temporary. I know that this is a short-term thing, but those short-term things become lifelong. And you watch, a lot of people go down these long rabbit holes of just not being able to get out of that cycle, of that lifestyle of being, more unhealthy.
Yeah. I mean, just the whole industry, especially just, we'll just kind of talk it from the driver's perspective. The industry set them up to have this super narrow looking through a microscope at their day to day, because they only get paid for every mile they go. Right.
Exactly.
And so when you have that, reward for that action, it is very hard to take a step back and realize that, hey, I want to be trucking or be in my career for 30, 40 years. For me to do that, I have to make sacrifices from a time aspect to prioritize my health. I'm not saying an hour or two today, an hour or two, but at some point, you have to do something on a weekly or daily basis so you can get there. So you can get there and be in your career for 30, 40 years and not just go hard as you possibly can for, 10 years and then not be able to pass a DOT physical, or having, diabetes that you have to medically retire, or a heart attack because you just didn't take care of yourself. And so I always tell drivers all the time, like, yes, it's important to make money today, but it's also important to make more money throughout your career. And if you can sustain and be consistent, that consistency word is something that comes up so often, but it's like, it is the name of the game in life, basically. It's like, how can you just do something, get into a routine and do it for 20, 30 years. And that's where you actually get to the top of the mountain versus sprinting for about 30 days and then falling off. And so, that's kind of the energy. And I wish more people thought like that. And I think there are a lot of drivers out there who are realizing that, or have had something happen in their life that luckily they survived and they were able to make it through, but that really flipped the switch for them. And they realized, hey, there's something bigger out there than making a couple extra dollars today and really, driving until I can't keep my eyes open anymore.
Right. No, exactly. I know I have a lot of truck driver friends. I was a broker for, a long time, 4.5 years, the listeners know. And then I was with FreightWaves for a while. And I know I have a lot of friends that are truck drivers, and some of them are in their late 40s, some of them are in their early 50s. They have, once a year or multiple times a year, they're having to go out for 3 months because they're having back problems. They're having knee problems. They're diabetic. So they're having issues with gout. They're having issues with just, just anything to do with their physical health. A lot of them just, they think, I've been doing this for so long, like, why, like, I like it, so why change? And it's just like, I always say, like, when you're in that much pain, like when you can see someone in that much physical pain from just doing what they love, and that's being on the road and trucking, and it just comes down to saying, hey, like, there's a healthier way to do this, and it's not it's not overly complicated. You don't like you said, you don't have to spend an hour or two a day doing fitness or trying to do this. You can meal prep things. You can also just do things, incrementally. But here's what we'll do, Mark. Let's change things up a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more like about your background. How did you really find yourself in the wild west of supply chain? How did you get here?
Yeah, dude. I don't even know some days, right? I kind of just fell into it because I growing up, I guess to start, 3.5 years ago, 3 years ago, I didn't know a single person in trucking or the supply chain. I grew up, both my parents are in the medical field. They're both optometrists, eye doctors, and kind of had a lot of people in the medical side of things. And that's where I ended up going down. And I have a doctorate degree in physical therapy. And I was, really big into health and fitness, and was going down the path of, getting into more of the preventative side of physical therapy, but, going to traditional physical therapy route. And I was working in a physical therapy clinic. I'm in St. Louis. And so I was in a small town exactly. I was in a clinic south of St. Louis, in this small clinic, small town, and working as a physical therapist, rehabbing people, and a bunch of truck drivers walked into the door. And I just got to get to know a couple of them really well, and, honestly saw firsthand what 20, 30 years behind the wheel can do to someone's health. And there was one driver in particular who I got to know, like, on a really personal level, became friends with. 37 years as an over the road truck driver. And he had just had a total knee replacement, and he walked in, actually with crutches, hobbled in after the surgery on day one, still a little loopy from all the pain medicine that he was taking because of it. And I just started working with him, and we worked for each other with months. That's the whole rehab process. And it's a really painful surgery. And so the rehab process is just as painful. And because we want to get this knee fully back so he can get in and out of the truck and do everything he wants to, we have to kind of push the limits and make sure that the range of motion and everything, I won't bore you with the medical side of things. But because of that, and during the early days, there's a lot of me stretching him. And instead of him crying and screaming out because it's painful, I talk to them, and I'm a pretty curious person just in general. So I really like to ask questions, and just started hearing about, those 37 years out on the road and his love for trucking, his sacrifices he was making as, he's a father of 5. He had 5 kids, and the sacrifices he made as an over-the-road driver over those years, and how he was really doing it to keep, a roof over their head and food on their plates. And, just hearing probably some of the big fish stories of his time out on the road. And it just threw me down this rabbit hole of the trucking industry. And, I dug deep into it, and just seeing stats of the average life expectancy of a truck driver is 16 years less than the average population, right? 70% of truck drivers are obese, the highest rates of diabetes among any other occupation in the United States, 2 times higher rates of diabetes compared to the average US worker. And it's like every single stat I read was more and more of holy crap. Yeah. And when I dug deeper into it, it was no one was truly coming in and meeting drivers where they're at and actually building something that fit their lifestyle that they could do anywhere at any time, and giving them, the meat and potatoes of those highest leverage activities, because there's a lot of BS in health and fitness, and there's a lot of non-evidence-based stuff out there. And so there was no one who was really showing them all right, you have a lack of time, you have a lack of resources. Here's what you can do in the back of your truck, at Love's Truck Stop, at McDonald's, even those types of things, and actually meeting them where they're at. And I was like, I can fill this gap. And so I decided, I started Supply Chain Fitness. At the time, it was called the Trucking Fitness Company, and then we rebranded to Supply Chain Fitness.
Now that's really cool. Now, you mentioned, the average, lifespan of a truck driver is 16 years less. And truck drivers are really the backbone of this world and this economy. And, to say that, the average person lives somewhere in their 70s, you really don't want to be taking 16 years off of your life. You're doing the work that we really need as a population and as a people. And we're so thankful for that work. You guys make so many, sacrifices to do this. So, you're putting your own bodies through so much stress that they don't need to go through. Something, Mark, I listen to, a lot of podcasts you're on as well. And, something you talk a lot about is just, you may not be able to eat healthy every single day, or be able to avoid going to fast food every single day, but there's always a healthier option, right? You can be healthy and still eat out and still, have those things, because it's not easy, especially being a truck driver. It's a lot harder to find, those meals that you're looking for, that you may want. And a lot of truck stops, they don't really make it easy, right? It's all fast food. It's not really sit down style. They do have some, there are some sit down style restaurants inside of some, but a lot of restaurants don't cater for truck drivers. So it just, they sit down at whatever truck stop that they're at, or they search out a truck stop that they're looking for that may have, the best, fast food option that they want. And it just, kind of comes down to, you've got to look at, kind of making some of your own food, and, prep it, going to Walmart's, going to grocery stores, getting your snacks there instead of just what those truck stops offer, right? You can make those small incremental changes, and you don't have to, dive full deep into it right away, right? You can start off really small and then just kind of build on to those larger changes.
Yeah. Well, and before we kind of get into that, I just want to take a step in for
please,
for the people who are not truck drivers out there and just listening to this, who are industry, think about that, losing 2 decades of your life just because of your career choice. And it honestly pisses me off that it exists. Yeah. And it's messed up as an industry that stat is out there. To happen. And it doesn't have to be. Yeah, because 100%. All of this is lifestyle based, and they are reversible or preventable. and we can do it. Today is not too late, and we can do this, and we can help millions of drivers out there. But kind of going back to what you were saying, you know, I always talk to drivers, and something that I ask them all the time is like, I say, hey, you know, you don't have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. Or do you even want to be Arnold Schwarzenegger? I've only had one driver who said, hey, I'm trying to be Arnold Schwarzenegger from a fitness.
Mike Lombard?
No, but I'm sure that would make two if I did ask him. Yeah. But you know, at the end of the day, there's so much, you know, there's any place that a driver goes, if it's at a McDonald's or, you know, a Popeyes or a truck stop or even going to a Walmart or a grocery store and stocking up, there is the healthiest option anywhere, right? It might not be the healthiest option possible. But if a driver, every single place they go to eat, picks the healthier option or the healthiest option they have available to them versus just, you know, going to McDonald's and grabbing the Big Mac, large Coke, a large fry every day, after 5, 10, 20 years, 30 years of their career, you're looking at two different people who chose that different path. And it didn't take any extra time. All it took was to say, I want a number 4 instead of a number 1, or going down this aisle instead of that aisle at Love's Truck Stop. And so, you know, what I talk to drivers is we really focus on finding their starting point, because every driver has a little bit of a different starting point. They have different goals. They have different preferences. And what we focus on is small, consistent changes that you can realistically see yourself doing for, you know, my goal is the rest of your life. But I always ask them, like, 3 years from today, could you see yourself consistently still doing this? And if the answer is no, for a driver particularly, it's typically too aggressive of a start. So we typically then scale back. And I would rather someone do such a small, almost laughable change on a consistent basis than someone who says, I'm flipping my whole life 180 degrees over. I'm doing this diet. I'm not eating this, that. I'm going to exercise for 3 hours a day and I'm going all in. And they're like holding on for dear life for about a week and then they fall off.
Yeah. It's just unrealistic goals.
Exactly. And there's so many people that just get stuck in this like on, off of this diet and just fitness health craze. And every time someone does this and then they fall off, it adds, like, it feels like a failure, and it adds another barrier that they have to hop over when they're actually trying to make changes. And so something I'm just so focused on, and I was talking to a driver earlier today who's a new member of our program, who I was like, all right, so, you know, you want to exercise, you know, we're just starting with 10 minutes of exercise a day. We've got some circuits that he can do in the back of his truck. And I said, you know, what's realistic for you on how many days a week do you feel like is realistic? And he said, every day. And I'm like, all right, man, let's pump the brakes. I've had a couple of drivers who have told, you know, I've a lot of drivers who say, I want to do it every single day. And I've got a lot of drivers who do it every day. But I also have a lot of drivers who say, I'm going to do it every day. They do it for about a week or two, and then shit hits the fan and life happens and they fall off. And then it just feels like they completely failed. And so what we did is we said, all right, let's set a goal of 3 or 4 times a week. If you do it every day, 2 gold stars instead of 1. If you miss, if you miss a day, then you didn't fail. You just go on and you keep going and you check in the box. And so that's kind of the mentality that we go about when we personalize each program to each person.
You know, I like to look at this when I've used this analogy a few times, right? If you miss a football game from your favorite team or a baseball game for your favorite team, it doesn't make you any less of a fan. It doesn't mean you're a failure as a fan, right? So it's the same thing with exercise, same thing with your exercise, with your diet. If you miss a day, you're not failing. Yeah, you didn't do your absolute best. That's okay. That's going to happen. You're going to have those days where shit hits the fan and things just aren't. You're not able to do it. Your 11-hour day turned into a 16-hour day. You know, you're exhausted. You just want to go to sleep after you're done driving when you had extremely bad days, or you get stuck in an area, you load late, things like that. Okay, it happens. Don't stress about that. Take the next day, realize I had a bad day, take the next day and push forward. You just have to take those off days and just realize, okay, I had an off day. That's okay. Athletes have off days. Just like athletes, I can have an off day. I can turn that off switch off, turn it right back on, and let's go back into my 15 minutes or my 1 hour of exercise. It's just trying to stay as consistent as possible, and realizing that those small little, those small little blips in the radar, they don't define you. They don't define what you're going to do or how you're going to achieve your goals. It just means that you had a day, and we all have them. So.
And to add to that, I always tell people consistency is the number one thing when it comes to
Absolutely.
health, and what consistency means is individualized to each person.
Absolutely.
For you,
100%.
Consistently might mean showing up every single day and checking this box. For me, consistency might be once a week.
Yeah.
But I'm consistently doing it once a week, and that is way better than me consistently doing 0 times a week. And so I think so many people, and I think it's just part of our culture. You go on Facebook, you go on Instagram, and you get down the rabbit hole of 6-packs and the fitness industry. And it's just like, it is not helpful for anyone, including the people posting that who have just as much mental health issues as we do about feeling like we have to have certain type of body, or we have to have some certain type of image. And so, I think more people just need to focus on, hey, 1% better today. Absolutely. I am being more consistent than I've ever been in my life, or I've ever been in the last 5-10 years. And I can see the needle moving in the right direction, and that journey of pushing the needle in the right direction and going towards that lifestyle that you can build sustainably around your day-to-day routine, your weekly routine, is really, the whole point of this whole health journey. And I just wish more people went into it with that mindset versus into it of, I'm signing up for Weight Watchers and I have to clean all the ho-hos and Twinkies out of my pantry, and I can't even smell, I can't be 6 feet away from a sweet, No,
and just like what you said, it's not having to cut everything out. It's just being consistent, right? You don't have to have the whole box of Twinkies in one sitting. Have a Twinkie and move on, right? Like, don't get me wrong. I have bad days and I have 3 Twinkies. It happens, right? Like, we all have those days, and it's just like what you said. It's finding that, like, what's consistent to you and what's consistent and what can work for you. Like, I personally, I don't work out on the weekends because I don't enjoy it as much, right? Like, I like to get off work or start my day with like a run, or start my work day before, or end my work day with a run, to get rid of, like, I know if it's going to be a long, stressful day, I'm going to start off with a run because I know, like, it's going to help me decompress and get ready for the day. Same thing with a long day. Like, if I didn't go for a run in the morning, I'm going to go for a run after work because I know that it's going to help me mentally. It's going to help me physically. And if I'm not, like, if I don't do it, like, that's okay. Like, I know that there's those really long days, but I know my mental health is going to be impacted every day forward. If I skip today and I skip tomorrow and I skip the next day, like, I'm going to have that feeling of that bad mental health feeling. I'm skipping this, and it makes me feel even worse. Right. So it's kind of like a compounding effect where, like, you don't want to do it and you feel bad about not doing it. So, like, you just kind of need to, like, just get into that consistency zone and say, hey, like, these 5 days where I work, or if you only drive 3 days or 4 days, whatever it is, take those days and say, hey, these are the days I'll work out. And when I'm home or doing other things, like, I'm just going to relax, be free, and then you can go right back to working out. But it's just finding that consistency that works for you, right?
Exactly. Completely agree. And on a different note of, if your go-to dessert is a Twinkie, you're gone. You're wrong already. That's a 100%. Subpar choice. You gotta go with something a little bit better than that. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't enjoy Twinkies that much, but it was a good analogy that was there. Yeah. Mark, I was touching on the mental health aspect, and how does fitness play into that mental health component, especially for truck drivers, because they are alone a lot of the time, unless they are a team or have their spouse with them or an animal. So how can just changing, your diet a little bit and getting more exercise, how can that really impact your mental health?
Man, they're 1-on-1, right? If what I've seen, and just kind of just seen it personally for myself of, if one falls off, the other one typically is right behind it. Right. And so, what I've also seen is, when one is worked on and improved, the other one is right behind it as well. And, there's so many correlations from getting outside, breathing some fresh air, going for a walk, sweating a little bit, breathing a heavy, breathing heavy a little bit, exercising, from a mental health standpoint. There's so much new research coming out from a diet standpoint on the impact it has on your mental health as well. And so I think it would be so short-minded, or whatever the wording, that's not even a word. I don't even think. Regardless, I think you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't consider mental health and physical health all a part of the same goal of being a healthier person and a healthier you. And so the people who are struggling with their mental health, it's really difficult to make changes, and it's difficult sometimes to even care about your physical health. And I think I'm sure you've seen a lot of drivers who, it's isolating, it's mentally draining after a long day. All you want to do is sleep and eat, and there's emotional eating, and it's tough. And there's a lot of people that, I think part of, making physical health changes or making changes to your diet and exercise, right there with it should be finding a way to improve your physical health. If that's talking to a professional, if that's, finding ways to do some stress management and, getting outside more and talking to friends and catching up with family and friends, whatever that is, I think it's all part of the equation, and it needs to be part of something that you think about.
Yeah, especially, you said stress management, and that's, in this industry, stress is always at, an 11 out of 10. So it's just always about, making sure you are finding those ways to decompress and find those ways you can, not have so much stress, whether that's, just taking those small breaths, those small walks, even if it's like hopping on a video game for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, you just have to have those decompressing moments, because you've got to be able to, de-stress, especially when the market and things are going, the way they are right now for truck drivers. The market's a concern, payments are a concern, everything is on fire right now for them. So, also having to stress about your mental health, your physical health, and things like that. It's not things you want to have to be stressing about when everything else is also on fire. So it's just about getting into those habits and trying to be, the absolute best version of you possible. Now, Mark, one of the last things I kind of want to touch on, some of these fad diets that kind of go around, carnivore diets, eating all meat, things like that. Like, what do you think about things like that, and how can drivers and other supply chain professionals in general, kind of steer themselves away from those style of diets that aren't really lifestyle changes? They're just 1 to 5 month changes where you're going to see a lot of fluctuations during it, and then after you're off of the diet.
Yeah, I mean, I think my overall thought on diets in general are, there is not a one size fits all diet. We all have different preferences. We have different things that we enjoy. We have different lifestyles that something makes more sense than other things. And I think at the end of the day, the best diet is the one that you can consistently do and enjoy and stay up with for the rest of your life. And that might be a combo of multiple of these, what you call fad diets, right? I think there's a lot of people that really succeed and do well on like a low carb, more, if maybe some people would call it a keto diet. I think there's also people that feel like absolute crap and don't have any energy on a keto diet because they don't have carbs to fuel themselves. That's included myself, right? But I think there's also other people that when they shift to other diets, they just have cravings that they need to enjoy, certain foods, or, that then they fall off, or they go binge certain foods because they try to stay away from it. And then it just busts and they go all out, and that's not great either. And so, what I would say, it kind of goes back to the whole thing of like, I would rather you keep your consistent diet, what you're doing today, start and make one change that you can consistently do. And then once that becomes a regular part of your day-to-day routine, then let's add another, small change, and just start stacking these habits on top of each other until we get to a point where you're moving towards your health goals, if it's a certain weight, if it's a certain, body style or way that you look, or more importantly, way you feel, and then consistently have that as a part of your routine and something you can live with for the rest of your life, versus, like I said, making that 180 flip and expecting, everything to just align after, because it's Monday on January 1st, right? That doesn't happen very often. Some people it does, but for me, it doesn't. And I'll tell you that. I've tried it in the past and it doesn't work for me. And so I think there's a lot of people out there who can relate to the fact that these huge changes just don't work for them.
No, I completely agree. And something we've touched on a lot in this podcast episode is consistency, right? So something that can be kind of intimidating for anyone really is getting those health goals and staying consistent. So I guess, what do you have any advice for anyone out there listening for how to be a little bit more, I guess, consistent with being able to track what you're doing, as well as building your health goals, right? Where should people start in terms of building that plan to be starting off to start being consistent?
Yeah, so I think the number one thing that I would say is number one, most people, when it comes to quote unquote being consistent, or knowing if they are being consistent, are their worst enemies, and setting themselves up to with false expectations of what actually consistency is. It kind of goes back to that once a week consistently is just as consistent as every single day, right? It just depends on the variable and the what end of the spectrum you are, and everyone has a different starting point, and that's okay. You can slowly push your way towards what you feel like long-term you want to be doing consistently, but you can't have that on day one, what you should be doing on day, 365 after a year, right? Yeah. And, I think from just an overall goal, there is a lot of, we're moving towards chronic diseases, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, and we're building out programs that are specifically for the industrial industries to help prevent and manage these chronic diseases, because they are the number one, unfortunately, killers. 7 out of every 10 people in the United States die of a chronic disease, and it's also the number one cost from a healthcare perspective in the United States, and also for large companies who are self-insured and hold all the risk for healthcare costs. 86% of all healthcare costs in the United States are directly associated to chronic diseases. And so there's some really amazing research and data and guidelines on how to prevent or manage chronic diseases, if it's prediabetes, if it's diabetes or hypertension. But when you kind of look at all of them from a bird's eye view, at the end of the day, the goal is to be more physically active. You don't have to go to the gym. You can go out and walk around. You can do yard work. You can go play sports. You can whatever you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Try to be more active. Every 15 minutes per week that you are active, research shows you have a 4% lower chance for all cause mortality, which is basically saying dying. And so the more physically active you are, the goal should be for you to be, the guidelines want you to do 150 minutes of moderate physical activity per week, which is 30 minutes for 5 days a week, right? That is a great goal. I'm not saying try to go out there and do that on day one, but that's something that you should strive for if you're not already doing that. On top of that, eating more lean protein, eating protein at every single meal is something that, especially as we get older, slows down on the rate of basically you losing muscle mass. Everyone loses muscle mass. That's why, the 90-year-old lady has a tough time getting off of the toilet or getting out of the couch, because they don't have the strength or the muscle mass to control themselves. And it's also a huge variable of falls and just frailty in general, and decreasing of quality of life. And so if you are physically active and eating enough protein throughout the day, which is typically 1 to 2 servings, a great way to say your servings is look at your palm, trace your palm, and you can use that as a measurement of 1 serving of protein. If you eat 1 to 2 servings every single meal, you're going to be in the ballpark, and you're going to be doing a lot better than you probably are right now for a lot of people out there. And then, no one has died from eating too many fruits and vegetables. So if you just push yourself
sure?
to eat, yeah,
sure okay.
I'm pretty confident, unless they choked on one, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Pushing yourself to eat more lean protein, and I'm not talking about fried chicken or hot dogs. I'm talking about lean chicken, 95% ground beef, fish, those types of things. And then eating fruits and vegetables, stuff that there's a lot of fruits and vegetables that you don't have to store in your fridge. You can just store in your truck. Yes, they sometimes you have to eat in a certain period of time, but they're great snacks that you can grab on the go. You can keep them in your passenger seat and eat while you're driving. And that's kind of the overall thought process that I do. And something just for me that I've been thinking about is like, I'm currently working on pushing my, how much vegetables I'm eating up. And just from doing that, I'm not counting my calories. I'm not doing anything. I'm just trying to fit more vegetables in my day-to-day life. And I'm feeling, I'm seeing a lot of, better. Yeah, for sure. And I've lost some weight as well, just from that one change.
Yep. No, that's really awesome. I really appreciate that insight. It's just like you said, it's just making those small changes and, trying to do your absolute best and finding those, like you said, like you may have to eat, your fruits and vegetables within a smaller time frame, but you also don't have to buy a ton, right? You're already on the road. You can buy enough for 3, 4, 5 days. And then as long as you're eating those every day, if you're eating a couple apples a day or bananas, things that don't, need to be refrigerated or just find things that have those longer shelf life, right? Like find bananas. If you're going to be out for a long time and don't want to go to the store, find greener bananas. So that way you can have those last longer. They can ripen out throughout the week, and just find those ways to you can also, do things like canned vegetables and things like that. It's better to have those kind of vegetables than no kind of vegetables.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you do have a freezer in your truck, there are lots of frozen vegetables. You can utilize some of that space, to get some frozen veggies as well. So there are lots of ways. And like you said, you can utilize just, lots of those down times when you're at a shipper or when you're at a receiver waiting to be loaded or unloaded. Use that time just to get a 5 or 10, 15, 30-minute walk in, because you've got the time. You're not doing anything else, or if you are, looking for loads or anything like that, there may be some other time where you can, when you're fueling up, spend 5 minutes and just go for a walk. Like there's some times to fit in those things. It's just making your health a priority.
Yeah. And for everyone who has listened this far into the podcast, I'll give you a pro tip that I am just shocked. A lot of drivers do not do this, and I don't understand why they're doing this. Drivers, you can order Instacart and get it delivered to a truck stop. You can order groceries really awesome. To a truck stop. And at the end of the day, it's all probably cheaper even with delivery than what you're paying at some of these truck stops. And fast food restaurants. And so go get some, even if it's twice a week or once a week, get groceries delivered and store them in your truck, man. That's like that is the easiest way of getting less processed food and having better options and healthier options, because that is the first thing every driver says is, oh, there's no healthy options out here. Well, man, we got technology. You can get them right delivered wherever you're at in the world.
No, that's really a really good idea and a really good pro tip for, like you said, anyone who's listening this long. We really do appreciate it. And Mark, I appreciate your time today and giving some of these tips and talking about, supply chain and driver fitness, because I really do think it's something that's really lacking and being talked about in the industry. And I love that, you're trying to bring to light, people like Mike Lombard are doing things like that. Where can everyone find you online? How can people get in touch if they're interested in learning more about Supply Chain Fitness and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, man. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on. I enjoyed the conversation.
Even though you're a Cardinals fan.
Yeah, well,
it's okay.
Hey, man.
No hate.
But if anyone wants to find us, SupplyChainFitness.com, Supply Chain Fitness on any social media. And if you're on LinkedIn, look me up at Dr. Mark Manera.
Awesome. Guys, again, we really appreciate having Dr. Mark Manera on the show, and we look forward to talking to him again. And, if you guys haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our twice weekly newsletter. It goes out on Monday and Wednesday, right around 7 to 8 a.m. That is thinkfreight.io/subscribe. And once again, thanks to Dr. Mark Manera, and we'll talk to him again soon.